This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
A vast universe exists within and beyond our reality. What we realize with our five senses is but a tiny fraction of all that is real. The universe is not a product of matter and energy, but a projection of consciousness and energy. Welcome, my friends, to the World Beyond Radio Show. I'm your host, Joe Wiegent, and I'll be your guide and advocate as we remove the blinders of our everyday lives and experience together all that exists out there in the world beyond our world. Welcome to the show today, folks. This hour, we're going to be talking with Mary K. Greer. Mary is a native of Nevada City, California, who describes herself as an Army brat who has lived all over the world, both as a child and now as an adult. Mary is an independent scholar, a writer, a teacher, and a professional tarot consultant. She has a master's degree, or a master's of arts in English literature from the University of Central Florida, where she first taught tarot in 1974. Until 1989, she was a teacher and administrator at the New College of California in San Francisco, where she taught tarot as an interdisciplinary subject, integrating art, literature, history, and psychology. Mary was a doctoral student at the California Institute of Integral Studies in East-West Psychology, and she left this when she decided to focus on writing tarot books. And she is the author of 11 books on tarot and magic. Her books have pioneered entirely new techniques for learning about and working with the cards, including being the first to present in-depth techniques for reading oneself. In 2007, Mary received the International Tarot Lifetime Achievement Award from the Association for Tarot Studies and is a recent research partner in Le Tarot Associazione Culturale in Italy. She also received the 2006 Mercury Award from the Mary Redmond Foundation for Excellence in Communication in the Metaphysical Field, and the 2006 Coalition of Visionary Resources Award for the Best Divination Book. She is also an ordained priestess in the Fellowship and Church of Isis. Mary has lived in Japan, Germany, England, and Mexico, and in 6 states within the continental U.S. She continues to travel around the world teaching. She currently produces Mary K. Greer's Tarot blog at http://marygreer.wordpress.com, which focuses on tarot history and research, tarot and pop culture, and tips and techniques for reading the cards. So let us give us a big welcome to Mary Greer to the World Beyond Radio Show. How are you doing today, Mary?
I'm doing well.
I would go over all of the publications that you've listed on the bio here for our readers, but I would be here until like another couple of hours. Needless to say, I actually have 2 of your books, the Tarot Court and the Complete Book of Tarot Reversals, which I think are the 2 most difficult parts of trying to read cards, personally. So what is it that got you interested in doing this, and what is it that moved you into doing it professionally?
That goes way back to the 60s, where I was in college and I had just been introduced to the concepts of Carl Jung in psychology. Then someone showed me a deck and a book about it, and I realized that the symbolism that Carl Jung talked about was present in the cards, and that I could actually relate it to things that were going on in that person's life. It became a sort of storytelling about their life, and people kept telling me how amazing it was that I knew so much about them. So the whole thing intrigued me, that you could get right to the heart of what was going on for that person immediately by using the cards.
So in a time when there wasn't much of a career doing this, how did you make that leap to doing this professionally and earning a living of it?
That took quite a few years. For one thing, there were very few books out at the time, so I taught myself to read the cards using what few books were around and a lot of people who let me read for them. But making the jump to professional reader really took about 7 years for me, whereas today, with classes, workshops, online facilities, people can do that in a matter of months or a year or two. So it was a slow process for me.
I totally identify with that, because it took me a while, just from going from reading just recreationally to actually really taking the leap to trying to do it professionally for people for money. So we're going to come back in just a few minutes. We have to go to our first break right now. My friends, you're listening to the World Beyond Radio Show. I'm your host, Joe Wiegand, and we are talking tarot with Mary Greer. Stay tuned.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Welcome back, my friends, to the World Beyond Radio Show. I'm your host, Joe Wiegand, and this hour we are talking tarot cards and professional reading with tarot professional Mary Greer. Mary, there's a lot of debate on where the cards actually came from. I've read books that say they started in Italy, and other sources say they came from Romanian gypsies passing through that area and then landing in France. And others say it even goes back to ancient Egypt. What's your take on it? Where did cards actually really start in this fashion that we know today?
It's pretty clear that they started in northern Italy around 1420 to 1440. There was a lot of experimentation with the idea of a trump suit that would win games over the regular four suits that had already been in existence for at least 50 years, possibly as many as 100 years before that. So it wasn't that they appeared overnight by one person in the form that we know. There were a lot of experiments. I've been to northern Italy several times with groups of people who were researching tarot. I've also been to Egypt with people who were researching tarot, and have looked in both places to see where any of the imagery comes. And it's very clear that it's right there in Italy at the time. You can see all the images around in the northern Italian towns from exactly that period, as well as the first decks that we have.
So it's actually, the concept is about 600 or 700 years old instead of maybe going back thousands of years then.
In terms of having the specific 22 major arcana images that we have, yes. Now, of course, divination's been around in a lot of different forms, and the conceptual frameworks are there, but not as the set of cards that we call the tarot. That came from Italy.
Now, did the cards start out? I've read some sources that say that the tarot cards started off as a playing deck, and had some of the images and symbolism and things on them as they began, but then kind of evolved into the psychology that we have today with that. Is that right?
Yeah. At the beginning, it was just a playing card game. And there's a few mentions of people using some of the cards in witchcraft and possibly divination, but very, very few, mostly with playing cards, that there was a possibility of divination until the end of the 18th century. In the 1780s and 90s, there came to be the idea that these cards were actually from Egypt and were an ancient divinatory system, and that caught on like wildfire.
Now, is that how or when the gypsy fortune teller type thing, took off and basically almost took over tarot for a couple of hundred years? Is that where that began, or is that a different catalyst altogether?
That's when it began, because those first people talked about how the gypsies had brought the cards from Egypt with the idea that the gypsies were Egyptian. That's where we get the name, rather than calling them the Ram. And as we know today, that they actually came from India. But interestingly, that the gypsies did arrive in Europe around the same time that the tarot was being developed, which lent a lot of support to that idea. But the cards, so it was really an invention in France by a man named Antoine Coeur de Gébelin. And he's the one who said that the cards came from Egypt, that the gypsies brought them, and that they were related to Kabbalah, to the Jewish mystical system of the symbolism of the Hebrew letters as associated with the astrological signs. So it all came together at once.
That's pretty fascinating, because most of the decks today that take themselves seriously blend so many different facets into their symbolism and design, pulling elements from numerology and astrology and psychology and Jungian philosophy and psychology. At what point did all of this start blending together, where it wasn't just one type of system anymore, but it was a blending of all different kinds of things?
The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn had a big role in that, because they were synchronous. They brought all the different correspondences used in magic together in a single unified system. And so most of us today in the English-speaking world use the set of correspondences devised by the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn when we read the cards and associate with them. The French use a different system, but they also make the correspondence between the Hebrew letters, the astrological signs, and the tarot. They just don't have as broad a correspondence system as the Golden Dawn did. The addition of the Jungian material really got underway in the late 60s when a lot of people were reading the work of Carl Jung and saw in these images the same things that Jung was talking about. And of course, Carl Jung worked a lot with alchemical symbolism, which the Golden Dawn also integrated into their correspondence system.
Exactly. So with that in mind, with it being so broad and pulling in from so many different kinds of sources and types of divinatory methods, what gives credence to some of the really outlandish tarot decks that we see out there today? You know, the kitty cat decks and the zebra decks, and we've got just about everything out there. Almost everybody can make or create a set of tarot cards, but most of their meanings are basically pulled back to that particular theme. What do we make of those kinds of things?
I don't actually use those decks, but I've seen plenty of people who get wonderful readings from them. So there's different ways that you can read the cards. One is that you can have a set of meanings and an understanding for the tarot and work with any deck. The other system is to work directly with the pictures on the cards and do projective storytelling in a way, added in perhaps with some psychic and intuitive abilities. So you can work with any deck at all and find that there's associations that can be made, either by a system that you've set up or your own concept of the art and the pictures of the time. I have worked occasionally with a variety of decks. I keep going back to the Rider-Waite is what I'm trying to say, which is a deck that was created in 1909, and the creators, Arthur Edward Waite, was very much into the symbolism of the Golden Dawn and earlier symbolism, alchemy, and so on. And Pamela Coleman Smith, the artist, was an amazing, intuitive, even psychic artist.
I actually use the Radiant Rider-Waite cards myself because I really love the colors. Some of them look like they were done with like colored pencil or something, but these are really, really vibrant and colorful, and they really kind of hit me.
Yeah, and that's important, really, to have that personal association. Most decks today are based on the Rider-Waite deck, at least the ones produced in English-speaking countries.
Mm-hmm. A lot of tarot books kind of all start off the same way. You know, chapter 1, they tell you, okay, don't concentrate on card meanings. Don't worry about card meanings. Just forget about that. Look at the cards and see what you think about it. And then the rest of the chapters of the book are, okay, here's all the card meanings. So how do we get away from that? How do we look at both of those approaches?
Well, I think it's really important to do both approaches. That's kind of my background and what I teach. I think it's a lifelong education process that you're involved with the cards if you're really serious about them, because the world of symbolism that's encoded in the cards is never ending in terms of a wealth and richness of understanding historically, artistically, psychologically. But we also need to develop that storytelling ability that draws on our intuitive connection with another human being. The cards are triggers to that process. And so we need both. We need the structure, and we need that letting go of structure. So it's a dance back and forth, actually, if you really want to be a good reader.
I also agree. You know, I work at a booth during the summer times on Saturdays at a big a farmers market bazaar with a bunch of merchants and vendors and all that come out there, and a lot of farmers and food trucks will come out. And so this is where I do most of my readings. And people will obviously approach the table and, you know, ask the silly questions like, you know, am I going to tell them their fortune, or am I going to, you know, tell them they're going to die in 2 weeks of cancer, or some, you know, stupid stuff like that. And what I try to convince people is that tarot is simply psychology with pictures. What do you think of that?
I think that the cards can be looked at completely from a psychological perspective in terms of what they call projection, which is that you project your own insights and intuition onto the pictures, and then we, as I said, weave the story. But the interesting thing is, with over 50 years that I've been doing this, the fact is cards come up over and over again that specifically relate to the very thing that the person asked about or just mentioned when they were saying what their issue was. And so there's an element to me that seems to go beyond the psychological, even if, it wants to be, people want to reduce it to just that kind of more scientific perspective of it's simply projection. It can be simply projection, but something else seems to slip in there.
I agree. I've actually, read 4 or 5 people in a row, and the same card will pop up, but it will mean something different to every person sitting at that table. One particular client, it'll mean this, but whenever the next person sits down, that card will pop up, and it will have a totally different focus and output.
Exactly.
So how do you approach a reading where someone sits down and they don't give you a particular issue that they're wanting to address? They just want to sit down and say, just give me a general reading, and you kind of feel like they're just wanting to test you. How do you approach that in your reading?
Well, there's 2 things going on there. One is the testing, and it just depends on the person. There's a few people who can block anything that you try to do. Others will be open to the process. But when they don't have a specific question, I ask them to ask in their own mind the all-purpose question, what do I most need to look at in my life right now? And then the first 2 cards that I put down in what's called a Celtic cross spread represent the heart of the issue. And those 2 cards always focus in immediately on something that's very much in the forefront of their lives. I've never seen that fail.
Outstanding. I don't really have a whole lot of experience with the Celtic cross, but we're about ready to go to a break, and perhaps we can get with that whenever we come back from the other side of the break. Friends, you are listening to the World Beyond Radio Show. I'm your host, Joe Wiegand, and we are talking tarot readings with our special guest, Mary Greer. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Welcome back to the World Beyond Radio Show, my friends. I'm your host, Joe Wiegand, and we are talking tarot with Mary Greer, a real tarot professional in talent and trade. Mary, could you describe the Celtic cross and how it works?
I often say to people that you can do an entire lifetime as a professional reader with only 2 basic spreads. One is a 3-card spread that can have various meanings, but usually is past, present, future. And the other is what is called the Celtic cross spread, or the ancient Celtic spread. First appeared in a book by Arthur Edward Waite when his deck came out in 1909 and 1910. Anyway, that's a 10-card spread, or 11 cards if you use a significator, a card that represents the person that's placed down on the table first. Then you lay 10 cards around it. 2 cards directly over that significator in the center. I call that the heart. Then there's a card below that center cross, a card to the left of it, a card above, a card to the right, and 4 cards up the side. Each of those cards or positions has a meaning. And so you're integrating the question itself, the position meaning in the spread, and the card that falls into that position. And it's actually a series of 3 and 4 card spreads, because you've got a past, present, future. You've got a conscious or mind card, the heart in the middle, and then you have what's more unconscious, deeply seated, or the root of the situation, and then a path of probability at the side. So there's probability in terms of the direction a person is going to take based on where they've come from in their particular issue. So without getting into what each card position means, I hope that gives an overview.
Outstanding. I just, personally for me, I never really, I guess I never did it enough to become comfortable with it. But I just don't use it much. I usually use a 3-card spread, and then if it's for an hour reading or whatever, I'll do like a 9-card spread, and I'll start crossing the cards with each other as opposed to doing the Celtic cross. So our next big question is, how can one read for themselves, and why is it so difficult?
It's not actually that difficult, except as we make it so. And part of it is our own laziness, because to read for yourself, you really takes a bit of discipline if you're going to get the most out of it. Those of us who are really familiar with the cards can ask a question, quickly lay out the cards, and get an impression whether they're favorable or not. You know, oh, good, everything's going my way, or, oh, no, what's this problem? Let me draw another card and see if that will fix it. We don't often do the depth of reading that we will do for someone else. And that makes a big difference, because if you spend time really looking at the cards and interacting with them, you'll find that they start opening out to great depths. So I wrote my first book, Tarot for Yourself, with a lot of processes and things that you can do to get deeper into the cards for yourself and make it fun, kind of an exploration, self-development, and self-understanding process.
I often read for myself because, you know, we all have issues that are going on daily, and different things that we're focusing on, or things that are happening to, with, or around us. But, you know, I think I fall into the same trap that everyone falls into, about just wanting to see the best out of any situation, even if it's a card that normally kind of has a more negative meaning, or a meaning of challenge. How do we get around that?
By sitting down and really going through the basic meanings. That's where knowing your card meanings can come in really handy, where you discipline yourself to state the core keywords of the card, and then begin addressing them and turning them into questions. So if you've got a card that says that let's say the traditional meaning of the 7 of Swords is a thief, stealing. You can ask, what am I stealing in this situation? What am I trying to get away with? And then really seriously try to answer that question. So it's not necessarily that it's a bad card. Sometimes that's the best that can be done in a particular situation, to get away with something. We all do that all the time. It's not evil. And we need to get away from that idea that even a problematic card is evil. It's what is on some level. And in understanding it, we might see other options, or we might understand and have deeper compassion for ourselves in doing the best we can.
How do you relieve someone's initial recoiling reaction whenever they see a card with some pretty vivid imagery, like the Three of Swords or the Death card or the Tower or something like that? That they see it and they just shrivel in fear. How do you reassure them about the cards?
Well, it's one reason why I love doing face-to-face readings where I can even do it on Skype video, but being with somebody, because I ask them to stay with that response and to tell me what's going on in them, because that's the key to what is happening in their situation. Their body knows before their mind does what the whole situation is about. So when somebody sees a scary card, the Three of Swords that has three swords piercing a heart, they know that there's some kind of heartbreak, heart pain, sorrow going on, and their body immediately goes to that place of memory of the last time when that was prominent in their lives. And so I want them to get in touch with that situation that their body is responding to. I read the whole person in relation to the cards.
So I had a question. Then when you started answering your going into you changed something and I lost my question I was going to ask there. How often do you sit down with somebody and you're just about ready to read them, and the first card that comes up, you know that the reading is not about them but somebody else? It's somebody else that may be connected to them, but it's not about how it's affecting them. It's about somebody else in their world, and that whole reading just takes off in that direction.
That doesn't happen to me. That it's maybe happened, I would say a couple of times in the whole 50 years. So part of it is your own intention, what you yourself as the reader perhaps draw to you, maybe for your own learning. But in the few times that happens, it's often because the client themselves is very psychic, very intuitive themselves, and they are channeling that energy. They are carrying that energy. So I'm concerned about the client that's sitting in front of me. And if that's going on, then that's a lot for them to have to carry around, the fact that they're feeling other people's experiences. And I want to help them deal with that. It's not really my place, and ethically, I am a little concerned about shifting the reading to someone who hasn't given permission to be read. It's a little bit like looking in a window and on someone who hasn't given permission.
Even if the events surrounding that person directly affect the client in front of you?
That's where I go. How is it affecting the client in front of me? For instance, a woman came in and asked immediately about her husband who had been out of work for a long time, and then about her daughter who was in prison, and was she going to be getting out in the next couple of months? And I said, I'm sorry, I can't read about them. I would like to do this reading about your concerns about them and all that you're carrying and what you can do to help them the most. And she started crying because nobody had ever asked her in her life what she felt and how she was handling all of these things, and to be there as a support for her in her dealings with her out-of-work husband and her daughter in jail. So I try to be there as much as possible for the client, but to help them with their real-world issues of sometimes dealing with very, very difficult things that are going on for other people in their life. It's not about the other person.
And that's the reason why I say that it's psychology with pictures, because for me, it's just helping people where they are, right?
Yes, exactly.
So what is your response to people who have just this innate fear of tarot? I've actually seen people physically pull family members away from my canopy while I'm at the bazaar. Mm-hmm. And, I've actually heard people say, get away from that. You don't want that. How do we break that fear barrier as readers to get people to understand that, this is not the devil or satanic or whatever people think it is?
I don't think we can, in most cases, break other people of those fears. That's something that in 5 minutes we're probably not going to make that kind of change. If you've had the opportunity to have a real in-depth conversation with someone and go through all the things, you might be able to open them up a little bit because of the history of tarot. It did come out of a Roman Catholic environment and was an expression of their core values. So, it's possible to teach someone about those things. But what I find when there's someone who's really afraid that it's the work of the devil is that I really don't want them around my cards because they're the ones who are bringing the devil into it. They're the ones who are making the cards into something fearful. In the world that I live in with the people I know who read the cards, that's not a part of them at all. They are the most benevolent and helpful tools that I can possibly imagine. And I don't want that kind of mindset anywhere near my cards. But I am sympathetic with the idea that there are members of a family who are feel naturally drawn to these cards or simply need help and assistance that they're not getting from anywhere else, and they're willing to reach out to anything beyond their normal sphere. So I certainly will, do readings for people who are open and aren't bringing that negativity to the table.
Whenever you start a reading, do you have the client shuffle the cards or touch them in any way to get some of their energy in them, along those lines you were just talking about?
Yes, I definitely prefer it when the client shuffles the cards. Of course.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to cut off that answer for just a moment. We do have to cut away for a break. My friends, you're listening to the World Beyond Radio Show. Stay tuned for more with Mary Greer. We'll be right back.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Welcome back, my friends, to the final segment of the World Beyond Radio Show. As always, I'm your host, Joe Wiegent, and our show is produced and distributed by the ever-expanding leader in New Age, paranormal, alternative health, and supernatural programming, the X-Zone Broadcast Network, and Relmar McConnell Media Company at their corporate headquarters and master control in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. To learn more about the World Beyond Radio Show, your host, or to discover a ever-expanding wealth of other amazing shows and their hosts, please visit www.xzbn.net. To contact me or to inquire about being a guest on the World Beyond, please email me at Joe Wiegand. That's Joe, WEIGANT, at xzbn.net. For more information, you can visit my websites, www.paranormalpeace.com and www.reikichoice, that's REIKI, choice.com. Our guest this hour is Mary K. Greer, and she can be reached at her website, Mary Greer, that's Mary, Greer, .wordpress.com. Mary, is there any other way that our listeners can reach you or get a hold of you or subscribe to your blog?
That's the best way. Go there, you can subscribe, and there's a way to contact me on the site.
Perfect. So when we left, we talked about using the client's energy to aid in a reading. And when I used to hand my cards over to a client and just say, shuffle the cards while you're thinking about your issue. And then whenever they would hand them back or they would cut them or whatever, then I would start the reading. But I found people just started manhandling my cards, so I quit doing that because I didn't like the way people were, they were doing these split shuffles and all kinds of other stuff with my cards. I didn't like it. And so I will shuffle the cards while they're discussing their issue and then place them on the table and let them cut the cards into as many stacks as they like and then restack them in any order. And then when I pick them up, I'm getting their energy and what's going on with them, and I can start the reading. How do you go about it?
I like to have the client shuffle the cards, but I understand what you mean. I've got a favorite deck that has henna all over it from a fair where the henna pattern hadn't dried on the person's hands yet. Oh, so, so I certainly understand, but it works just as well the way you do it, I feel. I just like the process, and also you learn a lot about a person from the way that they shuffle the cards.
I've got a set of cards that I can no longer use anymore because people started mashing them together and cramming them up and doing just all kinds of things. And I keep saying, just shuffle them the way I started. And then I just can't use them anymore because they just really look kind of beat up. So
yeah. And some people really like those beat up decks. It looks, something old and mysterious. I have a friend who's used the same deck for, it must be going on 20 years. And it's about 3 times the size of any other deck by that publisher because it's gotten so worn and so much air's gotten into it as the layers have split on the cardboard. Oh,
yeah. I saw an article a few years ago where a guy actually promoted trimming the borders off of the cards where just the picture was all that was left of the card. And I just couldn't bring myself to cut up a good set of cards that way.
I've done it to a couple of decks, and it can be really amazing, especially with the Thoth deck. Because you lay that against a velvet cloth backing and the colors of the cards just radiate out rather than having that little white border around them. But I've only done it with, I think, 2 or 3 decks.
Yeah. So speaking of decks, whenever you're doing a reading, and I've seen people do this and I've done it a couple of times, when you're using your standard Rider-Waite or whatever deck that you call home at this point, do you ever bring any like Oracle decks in, like the Ascended Masters Oracle deck or the Angels or some other kind of card deck to kind of bring in to reemphasize what you're doing?
I sometimes bring the Lenormand deck, which is originally a German deck from the late 1700s is when it first emerged. 36 cards, and it's very good at answering quite specific questions, finding lost objects, finding out, yes or no questions, will I pass the test? Will I get the money? So I will often use it at the end of a reading if there's still something hanging on, or occasionally there's a perfect question that those cards are good at dealing with. I don't usually use other oracle decks in my professional tarot readings, but I enjoy playing around with the oracles with friends.
If you're like any other tarot professional that I know of, I know a friend of mine who probably has 200 to 300 decks and still uses the same 2 or 3 decks with every reading. How many decks do you have, and how many of them did you buy just because you had to have them, even though you knew you would never read with them?
I have probably close to 2,000 decks. Well, it's been over 50 years, and at various times I've been given quite a few decks by different publishers, both for reviewing and just because they were kind enough to give me decks. And I also like to support a lot of the deck creators. It's a wonderful creative medium in its own right, and I want to let them know that their efforts are appreciated, even if I only read with the deck a couple of times.
I saw a deck a few years ago that was done by an artist, and he did the entire deck in kind of like a black paint brushstroke type of thing, and he had taken I believe it was children's nursery rhymes, the old original Grimm stories, and had drawn them in a very frightening and scary way. And when you're looking at the ad on the internet, it just looks like a really intriguing deck. But I know that I would never use that in a reading. I could not bring that deck out and sit down with a client and read off of that. But also, it's one of those things where I just don't want to pay the money just to have it sit on the shelf either. So.
Exactly. But, in writing books, I like to reference a lot of decks and, like I say, just see what the art itself evokes and support the artistic creation. But I do find that a lot of decks are more about the person's own psyche, the creator's psyche, and I don't really want to do a reading that's messing around in their heads. That's the way I feel. It's with their stuff.
Well, a lot of the decks are also so theme-driven that they may not apply to a lot of situations, but they're really cool because they have a particular theme involved with them, and they're nice to own, but they might not be something you want to read for other people, is what I think. But
yeah, and each person is so individual because I've found that if a person really resonates with a deck, even a deck that just doesn't make sense to me, that they can often do fantastic readings because there's some kind of chemistry that happens with them in the deck, even if I can't make heads or tails of the deck myself.
So there are some people around, and I've heard of a few people, even in my area, that they will offer reasonably priced readings, but before you leave their studio, you've spent $300 on oils and candles and other things to get rid of curses that are now attached to you and all this other kinds of things. And they use the readings to get people to come in so they can upcharge them on gimmicks while scaring them into believing that something is drastically either wrong with them or connected to them or attached to them somehow, and then victimizing these people financially. How does a person who's looking for a real honest reading find one in this soup of greed out there?
Well, just what you said. As soon as someone asks for something in, financial or some compensation for something additional to the reading, I suggest that the client walks away. There may be a situation where the person was really, being very honest about it, but in too many cases, it's a fraud situation. And if you look around, every field, whether it's medical, legal, home sales, whatever it is, there are people with fraud scams everywhere in every field. So doing your homework, going and getting recommendations from a local bookstore or other people, going to a good quality psychic fair. Usually they're going to get rid of anybody very quickly who tries something like that because they have to keep their reputation up. An ongoing psychic fair that's been happening every year. They're not going to stand for that. So it's up to the individual, just like every other field, to beware.
Outstanding.
Fraud.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
well, there's fraud, and like you said, there's fraud everywhere, and everybody's out to make a buck instead of trying to make a change, and it's horrible. But I really appreciate having you on the show today, and I hope we can do this again sometime. My friends, you have been listening to the World Beyond Radio Show. I'm your host, Joe Regent, and we'll be back again with some more exciting things every time we come to see you in your computer or radio or cell phone. Please have a great day, folks, and we'll see you again.